Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, and this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are, we'll be talking about travel risk management and some of the technology and the advancements and current applications that are available in the market. And today I'm joined by Charles Brossman. Charles will give himself a bit of an introduction, but just a brief overview. Charles has significant experience in the travel management industry, having held a number of senior positions. He has his own LinkedIn group under the Travel Procurement Professionals, which he has quite a sizable following, and some of you may also be members. He's 20 years in the travel management industry, particularly focusing on the technology aspects. He was a former Vice President of Client Travel Solutions at Control Risks, and many of you would remember or be familiar with Control Risks and a number of their travel tracking and monitoring technologies. He's also a certified travel manager through Cornell University, a former travel manager himself, and I'm sure I've done him an injustice. So I'll pass over to Charles. And Charles, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, all of the above. Would you just like to recap and give us a bit of an introduction of yourself?
Thanks very much, Tony. As you said, I have 20 years in the travel industry, including quite a bit of technology development, including a stint at Silicon Valley, company called Ridley. So I've been pretty lucky and well versed in many aspects of travel management as it pertains to technology, from the procurement aspect all the way through risk management and general travel management.
Okay, excellent. So the scope and the frame of today's training session is not to try and cover every aspect of travel technology, because as we all know, it's a growing and developing field and there's simply just too much to cover. We want to focus more specifically on travel risk management as it pertains to human capital. That is the risk associated with travel, how to make them more efficient, more productive, and certainly much safer. So to that end, Charles, how can businesses utilize technology to improve their travel management and reduce the risk to their employees?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think companies really need to step back and look at their travel program very seriously. So many companies today of all sizes, actually, even though it's typically their second or third largest controllable expense, often don't have a very managed program in place, unfortunately. And to really get your arms around any types of protocol for risk management or limitations of liability, you really have to have some type of program in place that is consolidated to give you the ability to roll out some type of technology which can then lead you into the next step of policies and procedures. So that being the case, step one, I would say, is it's really important that you get beyond just letting your travelers, book their own travel wherever they want to. You really need to try and bring it together under, a group of agencies that are contracted that you manage from country to country, or even some companies actually do it with one agency globally. But at least in a fashion with a provider that where the bookings are being made, and that's a good starting point.
Okay. Now, Charles, when you say managed, this is something beyond, as you said, just booking of tickets. This is something that is not invasive to the point of tracking their every move, but it's a far more engaged process than simply the process of payment and hotel and expense reports, yes?
Well, when you talk about travel management technology, I mean, it's a pretty broad spectrum of products and services. And, so for the purposes of what I understand we're talking about today is how that pertains to risk management. So without trying to go off into what I call the weeds and talking about things like expense reporting and things of that nature, online booking and expense reporting is all tied into what we call an end-to-end solution, and it's all very, very important. But when you talk about travel management, I hate to use terms like invasive, because quite frankly, when an employee is traveling for a company on business, there is inherent liability on the company's side, basically, because they're going somewhere on behalf of the company, and they're there representing the company. So if something happens to them, even if it's an accident, technically, and of course this is going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction or country to country, the company's really liable in many ways for that employee. So when you're implementing a program or technology that helps you keep your employees safe, and we'll talk a little bit more about those different types of programs. I mean, the goal number one is, how do you measure your ability to keep your travelers safe? I mean, because if you're letting people do whatever they want in terms of booking their own tickets, in a consumer travel website versus in a managed environment through a contracted travel agency, so you don't know where they're at. And so your ability to keep your travelers safe completely goes out the window, because you don't know where they are if you need to locate them in a crisis. So having that data is absolutely critical. And sometimes having the data isn't enough. You need to have that data in an accessible format that you can do something with it that's actionable. And that may be reaching the traveler, that may be getting a message to them, talking to them, or giving them a means to reach you, for instance. So some other things that technology can do in terms of risk management and safety is protect company liability just by making sure you have a documented record of notifying the traveler about certain safeguards, because they may be going to a part of the world where there are specific security concerns. And if the company doesn't have a record of stating something to the effect that we made sure that our employee was aware that these were the issues regarding safety in this part of the world, and something were to happen to them, the employee could say inadvertently, well, my company never told me about that, and therefore I was at risk, and I've been damaged in some way, and therefore sue the company.
Okay, and obviously as part of this is a lot of people tend to forget when they get, as you said, into the weeds of this. They see this as a cost center. They see it as an overhead or an avoidable expenditure in many aspects, where travel, by and large, let's not forgetting the underpinning reason, it's a competitive advantage, or it's a business enabler to a degree, and a lot of companies, I think, lose sight of that, and then therefore they don't realise that they improve the business as well as improving the productivity and certainly the bottom line.
Well, cost versus safety are two very different things, and you could talk for days and days about all the different ways that you can save money as it pertains to travel and managed travel. But I will say this when it comes to that topic, and keeping that short, and that is that, we all would like to believe that our employees are trustworthy. But the fact of the matter is, and I've got a lot of experience in auditing expense reports and consulting for different companies, and that is that when you leave it up to the discretion of the traveler, they're going to make decisions that are best for them personally, not necessarily what's best for the company. And I mean, it happens a lot where they will actually spend more money to fly or stay with a supplier that they get more points with versus the less expensive option. And it happens all the time, and quite shamelessly, as a matter of fact, but to the point where if you don't have a managed program to know what the comparisons are, you have no idea that it's going on, and it happens every day. And in short order, it in essence equals a certain level of theft, because they're knowingly doing that and spending that money for personal reasons, and it's not their money, quite frankly.
Okay, Charles, so the million-dollar question, what would be your recommendations for business currently without or considering introducing travel management technology into their business for the purpose of managing the risk to their people? What would be some of your tips or advice? And you've mentioned several of these already.
Well, some of the things that they need to ask themselves is do they have a protocol in place, and have they trained their employees with the protocol on what to do in an emergency or crisis situation. So ask themselves, do we know what to do when there's a problem? And if we know what to do our employees know what to do? That's number two. Number three is that process not only documented, but have you required that your employees sign something to the effect that they are aware of the process, they acknowledge it, they've been trained in the process? Because if a company doesn't take it upon themselves to train people on emergency procedures and the employee, pleads ignorance and there's no way for the company to prove that they've trained them, the company's liable, quite frankly. So it's really very important that they ask themselves, do you have anything in place? And then once you have something in place, as far as a procedure, what do you do with that procedure? There are many different scenarios that could come into play, from a natural disaster to a kidnapping, for instance, or even training some of your female travelers on some of the nuances of how to be extra safe as a woman traveling on her own in certain parts of the country or the world, wherever they may be, where it may be a little bit more risky for a woman traveling alone. And I know a lot of women business travelers like to have that kind of information and training because it really can save their life.
And in your experience, Charles, is this something that's achievable, or is this simply an unattainable goal? Is it? Do you hear a lot of people talk about this, and you hear the encapsulation and the objectives and so on? Has anyone actually been able to implement this, and how difficult is it to do so?
Oh, absolutely, and you don't need to be a Fortune or a Global 100 company to do it. Small companies can do this. As far as travel technology, from capturing all the information from a booking perspective, so you at least have access to the data, separate from any security technology. Fundamentally, you can get that from your travel management company that you contract and you build that relationship with. And consequently, they're the same people that are going to help keep you in the loop on whether or not your purchases made by your employees were the best price or not. And also help you source contracts with suppliers to make sure that you're leveraging your spend and getting some type of return on your investment. So you can get some of the basic technology from your travel management company, but as far as some of these security programs, it doesn't take an enormous global company to set in place and document some procedures. First and foremost, you need a basic travel policy. A travel policy can be a few pages, it can be chapters long, but you have to start somewhere. And within that travel policy, just make sure that at a very fundamental and basic level, you include sections on safety and security and protocols on what to do in various situations. And there's a lot of good resources out there to benchmark your policy against other policies. Quite frankly, by just basically reaching out to other travel managers or people in procurement that handle travel, either through a professional association like National Business Travel Association in the United States, which actually has global chapters worldwide, or other organizations.
Okay. What about the more developed programs? Those that have either bought into this or have been the early pioneers and adopters of this process. Is there any more